Hi, welcome to June 2025 edition of Fireground Strategies. I cannot believe how fast this year is flying by. But as long as we're talking about June, we only got less than 2 weeks to submit for FDIC. If you're thinking about doing it, and Pat, we're going to talk to you in a little bit about that. Get to it. Get to it. If you think you have something to share, I highly recommend submitting to FDIC. It's a great experience. I absolutely love it. Speaking of that, I haven't sent mine in yet. It's all done, but I just didn't do it. Push the send button because I'm always updating. But that's pretty exciting stuff. It's like April's going to be here before we know it. Chief Pavillo, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's summer's finally looking nice now and doing good. I did put my FDIC submission in, so glad for that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You got something to say, and even if you think you got something to say, the answer's always no if you don't put it in. So put in for the conference, and join the greatest fire show on earth, man.
It absolutely is. 37,000 people were there this past April. 37,000. That's absolutely amazing. Like you said, if you don't put in, the answer is always no. I kept saying, Frank Ritchie kept telling me to put in. He goes, I've seen you teach. You do a great job. I go, I'm not good enough. So I'm working at the firehouse. He shows up. He comes into my office, closes the door, and he goes, type this address in your computer. And he actually made me submit in my office. And
how many years have you been teaching there?
I've been going there since 99, but I've been teaching since 2011.
Good for you. Good for you.
So yeah. It's pretty amazing. I actually, first time I put in, I didn't get selected. And you got to watch your title. I did a class called Prevention, Not Intervention. So it was like as the incident commander to prevent people from getting in trouble. But they looked at it like it was a fire marshal's or a fire prevention class, and just kind of went.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens. You got to watch your titles. You have to watch. You want to make sure people understand what it is you're saying, and that onus is on you as the guy putting in. Because if we don't understand it when we're reviewing it, if it's unclear, if it's not well spelled out, if there's not enough, there are some that I've seen that it's just not enough information for me to make a decision on the class. So that usually becomes a no. And I know the other people that evaluate the classes. That's one of the things we always talk about. Make sure you are putting in, certainly as much as you need to sell your class, man, to sell yourself. Right? I didn't even realize I didn't even shave this morning. What a bum I look like, man.
So what else is new?
Retired, man. Retired.
It's not so bad, my friend. It doesn't suck.
No.
But you'll get there too, Pat. So anyway, Pat, why don't you introduce yourself before we move on?
Sure. So my name is Patrick Wirkus. I'm a battalion chief in the Elizabeth, New Jersey Fire Department, currently assigned to administration. Although, in talking to Chief Pavillo a couple of weeks ago at a class, the offer was too good to refuse. The chief of department is very much in my corner, so I still get to go on the operations side and work the line and go back to multiple alarms and everything. So that's not so bad. I'm also a deputy fire mutual aid coordinator here for Union County.
So first, tell us a little bit about Elizabeth, because I'm a New Yorker and more recently someone from Connecticut. I don't know a lot about Elizabeth. I know where it is. I drive through it. Yeah. And then tell me about the mutual aid coordinator to tell us what that is, because it's different wherever you go in in the country. I mean, I understand you guys are like fire directors and things like that. So why don't you explain what your role is first in your department and then in mutual aid?
Sure. So Elizabeth is approximately 12 and a half square miles. We have about 130,000 people packed into those 12 and a half square miles. So it's very densely populated. We also have Elizabeth Seaport as well as Terminal A of Newark Airport. So if you ever flew into Newark, you probably flew into Elizabeth at some point or passed through Elizabeth. We run 7 engine companies, 3 truck companies, and a rescue, 2 battalions, and then a shift commander, which is the deputy chief. And we do approximately 24,000 calls a year between fire and EMS. We also have a civilian EMS division with 50 or 60 civilian EMT supervisors, and then they have a EMS chief and deputy chief that oversee the civilian staff, and they report to fire administration.
How many transport units do you have in the EMS side?
So fully staffed, we have 6 BLS transport units, and then in New Jersey, our ALS units come out of the hospitals. They hold the CN for ALS transport. So in New Jersey, we're BLS providers. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So our transport units are BLS. Again, those are civilian EMTs on them. And then the firefighters are first responders and EMTs. So we run a tiered system where, depending on the nature of the medical aid, the engine company, or they'll get an engine truck and a rescue if it's an entrapment with an ambulance. So it's tiered based on the nature of the incident.
That sounds pretty busy. And I know you're pretty densely populated. Like that whole part of the world is densely populated. Crazy stuff. Now, is Union County different than other counties the way the mutual aid coordinator works, or they're all similar?
So I would say, again, I'm biased towards Union County, right? I think we have one of the best mutual aid systems in the state. However, we have 21 towns in Union County. We're a mix of volunteer and career. Obviously, Elizabeth is the county seat. We're the largest department in Union County. However, we are surrounded by both career and volunteer alike. And we have 14 coordinators now, 13 or 14 coordinators that split up the county. And any working fires, second alarms or greater, any major incidents, there's a lot of movement. Even in Elizabeth, if we go to a second alarm fire, we're pulling in mutual aid resources for cover assignments. So we work very well in the county together. Most departments provide a mutual aid coordinator because Elizabeth is the biggest department in the county. We actually provide 3 chief officers. There's a deputy chief, and then myself and another battalion chief who serve as coordinators for the county. And we respond anywhere in the county that we're needed.
Oh, now, do you guys, different departments, train together, or is that at a county academy, or do you train with your neighbors?
Yeah, so we have the Union County Fire Academy located in Linden, which is right next door to Elizabeth. So depending on the department, so Elizabeth, we run our own academy in-house because we're the size that we are, we're able to do so. But we train on the drill grounds in Linden. The other departments sometimes run a joint venture at Linden, Union, Rawway. Some of the other career departments, if they're hiring at the same time, they will send their people to a joint academy at Union County. And then the volunteer classes usually run nights and weekends. And there'll be a mix of all departments within the county, and even some departments out of the county come down there to train. We just had Bayonne doing live burns there a couple weeks ago. We were doing live burns for them. So it is a good mix. I have to say, I can't speak for other counties, but Union County, I think the 21 towns work very, very well together. There's really not that your career, your volunteer. It's a good mix of guys that take care of business when it needs to be taken care of.
What do you guys do as a? I'm sorry, Duff. As a county coordinator, like if you go out of, like I know you guys have gone into Hudson County. I seen the ladder up in North Hudson. We had multiples. So what's your responsibility when you come into a place like North Hudson or Jersey City or even Newark?
Sure. So our responsibility is really to support the incident commander and the command staff there, and supplement as needed wherever we are needed, whether that's for an accountability type aspect or fill any command staff roles that might need to be filled. And that's even the same here in Union County. We're not coming in to take over an incident, right? So to be a coordinator in Union County, you have to be at least a battalion chief or above. So you have to be a chief level officer. And if there are any vacancies in the incident command system that need to be filled, we can fill them for you, which is a majority of what we do. But even if it's just to communicate in between Newark or North Hudson and the Union County assets, we're there just to serve as that liaison, if you will, if that's what we're needed for. And then we will obviously oversee and be responsible for the Union County assets that go out of county, and somebody to kind of bridge that gap, if you will.
Now, you guys also have like a ton of industrial occupancies there, or all that stuff. Is that Elizabeth too, or is that more like Linden and Rahway and that sort of thing? And talk about some of the the mutual aid sort of either training or agreements you have, because I know there's like refineries and all that stuff down there. I mean, like there is an awful lot of things that could go wrong down in that area between Newark and Union County. So how does that work?
So Linden is the home of the refinery, right next door to us. There, it's a couple blocks away. Obviously, we have the seaport and the air, part of the airport as well. So a lot of it falls into not only the Union County mutual aid system, but the UASI assets as well. So Linden houses the decon trailer for any hazardous materials incidents, as well as the county's and UASI water tender. We house the foam tender and the Neptune system, or what was the Neptune system. I believe it's being phased out now. So we kind of, if there is a larger incident, we're all coming together. We're also part of the Fireboat Task Force, which North Hudson is a part of as well. So anything on the water, anything down in that industrial area, we all come together and work together, whether it be just through Union County Mutual Aid or if it's a UASI response for one of those larger type refinery fires.
Okay. One quick question. Explain UASI to everybody, because I'm not sure if that title exists out of New Jersey. I mean, I'm sure everybody has those things, sure. But I know what it is. But explain UASI to everybody, and explain UASI. Yeah.
So the Urban Area Security Initiative, there's different groups within UASI. So you have the Technical Rescue Group, which we're a part of as well. So different towns and different counties within this area. So Hudson, Union, Middlesex, Morris. I know I'm going to miss a few, but they are all a part of the UASI region in the New York City area. Passaic, yes, yep, and anything that happens within this area, whether it be technical rescue or hazardous materials, foam assets. Each department will host either a rescue truck or a foam asset or decon type asset. And if anything happens within this region, we'll be notified to respond. And then all of the towns will get together, and the 13 or 12 or 13 rescues will come together, and they train together, right? We all go to structural collapse school together. We all take hazmat together. So if any incident pops off, we're all trained the same exact way. We'll come together and be able to handle the first operational period is the way it's set up.
Right. And they also have air units, right? Each of the UASI counties have the air units as well. These big MSU type trucks, they're like monstrous. And I know the one in Hudson County, I believe, is in Jersey City, and they'll respond to, part of they get a high rise fire. the UASI Air Unit is going to respond. I think Bergen County's in Hackensack, and
we have the Union County Air Unit in Elizabeth, so that is there as well. It's another asset.
Yeah, and the Neptune system they used to have was this huge. It was a big hose reel, 12-inch LDH, and it looked like a carnival truck going down a turnpike. But it took a real long time to get the UASI system in place. That may be part of its demise. The other may have been every time they drafted out of like the kill van color, something like that, they're probably sucking up bodies in that thing. And you get a body shooting out of your deck gun. That's, body parts shooting out of a deck gun. Probably not a good idea. But I'm sure that's been around a long time. So I guess retiring it just made sense.
Yeah, I think there are still a few operational in the state. But that was a big thing when my dad was around and Chief Heitmeyer was around. They had that thing like a well-oiled machine, but it just the maintenance and the upkeep, with anything, as things age, it gets very, very difficult and very, very expensive. And so, but I believe they are. If we need it in the state, there are still one or two still available. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, It definitely, it served its purpose, and the drills came together great. I remember going to watch them, even before I got on the department, and they would set up the trainings and the 12-inch hose, and it was a sight to see. It really was.
Wow. I can't even imagine 12-inch hose. Listen, I got to stop this for a second and tell you guys, I'm like overloaded on Jersey people. I spent the last 4 days with Moran, Jack Murphy, John Lewis, all up in Syracuse, and here I am. It's like I feel like an outsider. I'm gonna go outside on my deck. You guys just chat.
Oh, because I did have some other questions here. So you mentioned your dad. Let's talk about your dad. I knew your dad well before I knew you. His name is Lathy Wirkus. He was a deputy, I guess, in Elizabeth, and a real go-getter and an influencer all over the state. And you didn't argue with Lathy. Like it was one of those things like, you knew if you were dealing with Lathy, there was going to be an argument somewhere, and not necessarily an argument, but an enthusiastic debate is probably a better term. But, talk about your dad a little bit. His dad is a legend, man, and a really, really good dude.
Yeah. So my father came on the job in Elizabeth in 1981. So that was about three years before I was even born. And before that,
holy shit! How old are you?
I just turned 40 in December, so I'm still not too bad yet. But yeah, so he came on the job in 81. Before that, he was a callman with the Union Fire Department right next door, and my uncle was a battalion chief there too. He retired out of Union, and. But yeah, so my dad took the test for Elizabeth, got on in 81. And then from what I remember, he was always in busy companies. But the thing that really was kind of like the highlight for me when I was a kid was, and Chief, you would remember, he got caught in a flashover in, I believe it was 89. There was he went to a house fire. He was a fireman in a rescue. He was backstepping a rescue. And they had a report of somebody trapped on the second floor. They went up to conduct a primary search. The room ended up flashing as they were searching. He got stuck in the room there for a little bit, ended up diving out a window onto the porch roof, pretty much on fire. And they put him out on the porch roof. He was in the burn center for, I don't even remember how long. I think I was 4 or 5 at the time. But when he came home, there was a line of fire trucks outside. And I was like, I always had the fire trucks as a kid and everything. But ever since then, like I knew, I was like, I got to be a part of this. Like, this is awesome. And then, so he went on. He was a captain in a rescue company. He actually was the captain in the rescue working on 9/11. So Elizabeth went over that day. He was there for a couple days, and then obviously went on through the ranks to battalion and ultimately retired as a deputy on the second tour. But he was talk about UASI. He was the chairman at one point there. He did a lot with that was like his baby was UASI, but he loved the Elizabeth Fire Department, and even now he still can't get enough because he's working over at the Port Authority, so for the Preston firefighting unit. So he still can't get enough, right?
Yeah. Now, didn't his hands get burned up or something? His gloves were wet or something like that.
Yeah, his gloves were wet. He had his spare set on, so his hands did take quite a beating. But the interesting thing was, back then they were wearing the 3/4 boots and and the longer jackets. So the bunker pants still weren't mandatory in Elizabeth at that point. But he being who he is, right? He was always ahead of the game, thinking ahead. He not only had bunker pants on, he had a Nomex shirt on. He had his coat. If I remember correctly, the only like city issued item he wore was the SCBA and the leather helmet. Everything else he had purchased on his own, and thank God he did, or he probably wouldn't be here. But so at the Fire Academy every year, if he's not available, we show his video, and he still has his turnout gear from that incident and the SCBA. So we show it to all the recruits as they're doing their flashover training to show how serious it is and the importance of knowing fire dynamics and fire behavior and how you could get caught in a jackpot, and it's no joke.
Yeah, Could you repeat that about fire behavior and fire dynamics? I want this to get into people's heads that are listening to us.
Yeah, it's so important to understand fire behavior, fire dynamics. I tell all of the recruits to look at the new studies out from ULFSRI. I promote that 110%. It's important to know the job, right? Because, and I get people catch flack for being juicy or too into the job. I don't think you could ever be too into the job because, you know what? My father wasn't expecting to work that day. Is that something that could happen? Yeah, I mean, we got to expect that could happen, but you have to be prepared. It's okay, right? The hard and soft environments, right, Chief? Like we can have all the fun we want in a firehouse, but we have to make some of that fun training and be prepared for what could happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, the story of your father and that incident is in Uncommon Valor, which is Frank Viscuso's first book. It's a book about firefighters that went above and beyond and paid prices. I don't think any of them were line of duty deaths, but a lot of them got hurt pretty bad. And his father, Patrick Wirkus, his story is in that book. And again, it's giving my buddy Frank a plug, but that it's a good book. It's the first book I read that Viscuso did. And I think it's his best, quite honestly, because it was done with a lot of heart from a guy who was, a new writer, and that's, that's why we like to have Pat on here. He's a rising star. He just had his first article, right? First article in fire engineering. And, saw that he was in my Fire Officer 2 class. So, he's drank the Kool-Aid, he's addicted to the job and, and that's what we look for, so all good stuff. So Duff, I know you're not used to not talking, so please say something.
You know what? I am listening, and Pat, I know you're like 35 seconds now, but you've truly impressed me. I love what you're saying. It's so true to say every member doesn't think like you do. Obviously, that's why you're a battalion chief. And obviously, your legacy from your father, you learned that all these things are important. Guys think, well, you just tell me where to point the hose. Tell me where you want to put the ladder. But all those warning signs and all those things understand fire behavior. Chief of Illinois, I talk about this all the time. In Firefighter 1, you get 2 days of folding salvage covers properly, and you get that much on fire behavior, and building construction, even, it makes a difference. Oh my God. And so many people, and I'm not going to say names or anything. Like, what do you need to know that for? Well, if I'm standing up front with a radio and making decisions about what you're doing inside the building, I better know. Like Francis Brannigan's book, I always say it's one of the hardest books I ever read. It's very, very technical, but I think it's the most important book I've read if I'm the guy standing out front making decisions. One of the most important. There's so many.
It's always on the promotional lists in New Jersey. That book has been there since, I started reading for Captain. It's been there for a long time, Two other questions I have for you, Pat. Number one is, tell us about your article, man. Congratulations. That is like, I remember the first article I did, and you see yourself in print, and you're like, wow, man, that is like so cool. You gotta be so proud. I'm sure your dad is proud. You made the whole Elizabeth Fire Department proud. So tell us about your article. What influenced it? What what's about, and where would you go from there?
Yeah, so funny is you actually influenced it, because 2 years ago at FDIC, when I told you I got promoted to battalion chief, you asked me right at the book booth when you're writing your first article, and I'm like, what am I even going to write about? Like, there's so much, there's so many guys out there that have good stuff they bring to the table. Like, what could I possibly even do? So I started thinking, and it really didn't click until last year, I would say. And I started going to a lot of fires. We got really busy between both mutual aid and Elizabeth. And I kept hearing, I can't get a word in edgewise on the radio. I can't get a word in edgewise on the radio, or the chief keeps bothering me. I just let me put the fire out. Just let me put the fire out. And company officers would complain about radio time, and I started to notice that across the county, and then listening to different people at FDIC, that this is, and you mention it in your book, division supervisors just make the incident flow so much better and take a lot of the onus off the incident commander. So in Elizabeth, when we have a first alarm assignment, we're getting 4 engines, 2 trucks, a rescue, and 2 battalion chiefs. And we were so used to a centralized command type model for so long, where the company officer would just report right back to the incident commander, and the IC would either get overwhelmed, or you couldn't get a word in on the radio. And I said, we really got to start pushing this division supervisor thing. And it was the same thing in Union County too. The mutual aid companies, they would be calling the command post, and you would start exceeding your span of control. And I said, we have all these chief officers that are available at these incidents. I started going there, and somebody said it the other day. I was talking to him on the phone. He called it the white picket fence, right? And it's like, I don't need 7 white helmets standing at a command post, right? So, and again, in Elizabeth, we never really did that. Our battalion chiefs go inside. We had the deputy chief runs the fire, and the battalion chiefs go inside. But it was just, for so long, I think it was just used to, okay, the battalion will make his report. The Engine 1 captain will make his report. The Engine 5 captain will make his report. And it got overwhelming. I started to say, I'm right there. Why don't you just report to me as the battalion chief? So instead of the IC having to talk to 7 different people, they only need to talk to 2 or 3, depending on the complexity of the fire. I'm not, again, don't take me out of context, because I know some people will be like, do we really need 2 battalion chiefs on a mattress fire? No, probably not. And that's why I tried to address it in the article I put in there, dynamic incidents, right? So if I have multiple floors of fire and I'm trying to coordinate between the first and second floor, or the second and third, right? It really reduces that span of control. It allows the company officers to be company officers. And if I'm a company officer, I really should be making sure that my members take, or are completing their task level tactics. That's what I'm there for, to make sure they're doing their job. And if I put the onus on the company officer to start overseeing an entire division, when I have chief officers there that can fulfill that and take that step back approach, and really be able to make sure searches are being completed, the ventilation is coordinated with fire attack, that the captains are in fact overseeing the appropriate task level tactics that are being taken at that time, I think that just makes not only the fireground safer for everybody, but it just makes the incident flow so much better. So I really, I felt passionate about it, and I thought about what you said, and obviously have read your book and took a lot out of not only listening to you speak, but what you write. And I said, you know what, I gotta apply this in not only Elizabeth, but Union County. And so far, I think it has been well received. I'm sure there's going to always be some people out there that don't like it or have an opinion, and that's fine. But they're going to be hard pressed, because I've seen it work every time we've instituted it. It works. It just makes the incident flow so much better. And it's, again, it's like one of the Lathy Wirkus things, right? We'll have a nice debate about it, but it's going to be hard to disprove it when I've seen it work.
I have a question on that. Are you all on the same frequency?
Absolutely.
So the incident commander is on one frequency and the battalion chief will report to him, or is he monitoring everything at the same time?
So the way we work is we get dispatched on our dispatch channel, and then we get assigned a fireground frequency. So the incident will go to that specific frequency. So yes, everybody is on that specific fireground channel. Is the way we work, whatever channel we're assigned.
Awesome. I like it. I like it a lot. Instituting, and I'm sure
listen,
it's
you know what? It's so nice to see like somebody who's still out on the line, and because it does work. It works, and it worked. It worked for me. It worked better once we regionalized. We actually had some people, but it works. And sometimes the hardest part is getting your mutual aid partners to buy into that, and sometimes your own department. But I always looked at it like the company officers are eyes-on, hands-on people, and they should be allowed to be eyes-on, hands-on people. But the battalion chiefs are eyes-on, hands-off, which allows you now, having too many eyes-on, hands-on people in charge of too many other eyes-on, hands-on people sort of muddles the mix, it muddies it up, and not, it's the eyes-on, hands-off people allow the company officers to do their job, and I think that's a really, really important piece of that game.
So I have a question. I know it's going to twist Anthony's head apart, but what do you think about incident commander down the block in his vehicle, in his buggy, and trying to run the incident from there? I don't. It's not a real question, because I know you're East Coast and I know you don't do that. But I just thought it'd be funny to ask him.
I know him and Chief Castros have healthy debates about that, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah, I talked to Castros yesterday. Not about that.
Yeah.
But
but to that point too, right? So and look, is there maybe a time and a place for the vehicle, where you have a view of the front of the building? I won't be totally opposed to that idea, but I think you really, as the IC, and again, when I'm the incident commander, I'm usually the incident commander for 10, 15 minutes, and then the deputies relieving me, and then I'm going inside, right? But if I'm the IC, I want to make sure that I have a good look at that building for changing conditions, especially for the companies operating inside on the initial alarm, until I can get inside and start getting a good look. And that was the other thing too. Another point that was brought up with the article was micromanaging company officers. And I don't believe that to be the case, because the company officers have the duty to make sure that their members are carrying out those task level tactics, right? It's not about micromanaging. It's about span of control and making the incident flow better. And I'm not up there to take over, but Chief, you said it at Fire Officer 2 a couple of weeks ago. Somebody has to be the adult in the room, right? And that the battalion chief on the inside, or whether it's a deputy chief that came back, whatever the case might be. My father used to go in all the time as a deputy chief, as a division supervisor. He would come in off duty, right? If we get, second, third, fourth alarm fires, whatever the case would be. But I truly believe that if you have the resources, and whether that's working with mutual aid or using a mutual aid coordinator, that's a chief officer, to fill those important positions, that's critical. And yes, you still need somebody on the back, on the Charlie side. And if you can put somebody, in that position, 100%. But the problem's not outside. The problem's inside. And it drives me nuts when we aren't proactive and moving forward to ensure that our companies are taking care of business.
Great. Just one thing. You're not expecting Chief Avila to be the adult on the, I just.
No, I have never grown up, Duffy, and I won't. I refuse.
That's okay. But here's the thing. We can't not grow older.
No.
Yeah. Yes, no, sir.
I know.
But
poor Brian Wilson grew old, and he's not growing older anymore.
Yeah, that's too bad. And unfortunately, it's happened more and more as I get older. I'm noticing more and more people saying bye-bye. That's an interesting sound. I don't know what that is. But anyway, so tell us.
What?
Are you putting it? I'm talking to Pat. You behave yourself.
I couldn't hear you. What did you say?
I was asking Pat if he is going to submit to speak at FDIC.
Yes, so I actually I submitted my proposal 2 nights ago.
And is it on the same subject as your article?
Fingers crossed, same subject as my article, yes.
Awesome. It sounds like you know it inside out. To me, it sounds like that. It sounds like you have a good handle on it, and I think you'd be great in front of a room.
I appreciate it. It's something I'm passionate about. It's something that again, I think that if more people embraced it, I think firegrounds would be a lot better managed. And I know there's people out there that utilize the model, and I think that's fantastic. And, maybe there's some people out there that can't use chief officers as division supervisors. And look, if that's what you're dealing with, I get it, right? My volunteer department, we might be putting 4 people on a first alarm assignment. So I understand that aspect of it. But then utilize a company officer that's not assigned to a company, right? Or maybe one of your training captain or an experienced captain to fill that role that's really not overseeing those task level tactics, right? There's always an answer for something. There's always an alternative for something. But when you start utilizing or when you start making excuses, we talked about this too, buddy boxes, right? I don't like that department next door. I'm not using his chief, right? And then you got to wait for the chief to come from 5 towns over. That's no good either, right? You really have to, it's about relationships. It's about working together to make that incident run smoothly. And look, if you train together and there's still personality conflicts, I don't know what to tell you, but what I do know is that we have a responsibility as chief officers and as firefighters, and that is to protect life and property. And if you can't get over the fact that you don't like the guy next door, or maybe he's not trained up to your level and you haven't taken the opportunity to train him to the level you'd like him to be at, then I think you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. I want to go back to talking about your volunteer department or any small department.
Sure.
You don't need to decentralize the command when you only have 4 people on the fireground.
Sure.
There are places in this country, and I'm not knocking them, but maybe I am a little bit, where they're putting a company officer being outside command while he sends his 2 newer firefighters in to fight the fire because he has to be command. Well, if you're the only one in command till a chief officer or a higher ranking officer comes in, the only people you're in charge of are those 2 people you will ride with on the engine. Be with them and make decisions there. You can talk on the radio to incoming units and tell them, hey, you need ventilation, or I need somebody to search the 2nd floor upon arrival. And then you start decentralizing command. But if you got 4 people, that's it. You got the pump operator and maybe 3 firefighters, or unfortunately in some places it's less than that. So you don't have to decentralize, but as it starts building and more companies start coming in, then I believe it's probably a really good idea. In my department, it's a small department. You get a first alarm response, and then everything else is mutual aid. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm going to say, you're the first in engine company, and there's nobody there but you. That's you in charge of. Now, the next in company, if you want to put somebody outside and let his company operate, especially if it's the trucks used to operating, by themselves autonomously. But if you're an engine company, I think, that's all you need to worry about. But as it grows, be ready to break it up and, either by floor or in a condo complex. Okay, you got, the building, you got building on the C side and you got the building on the A side, or however it's laid out. You can put some division officer in charge of each exposure, I'll call it, and I think that would work really, really well. Now the command is treating it almost like two separate fires, getting information from what's happening in, one side of the condo and information what's happening in the other. And I think that would work really, really well, because I'm talking from my experience. I'm a smaller department. So that's, that would work for me. I'm not in a city the size that you work in, and you don't have as many units for a long time before you have to start doing that.
Yeah, so that's a great point that you bring up, and where I am, even the smaller departments, right? They're getting the mutual aid units that are coming in to assist them as the incident grows. But yes, initially, decentralizing is very difficult to do when you have limited staffing. But to be prepared for that, and not only that, but what I tell guys is, if you're using decentralization and practicing the right things on these non-dynamic incidents, then when the dynamic incident hits, it's going to be like second nature, right? So maybe I did have a one-bedroom fire that didn't have much extension up to the second floor. And you know what? Do we really need two division supervisors? Maybe not. But if both battalion chiefs are there, or your agency has somebody to put in that position, when the incident grows and the manpower allows, maybe allow yourself to do that so you could get those sets and reps in. So when the dynamic incident happens, you're good to go.
Yeah,
exactly. It's okay to use it on a smaller incident, even if you don't technically really need it. It is. You're right. It's just like practice. I'm going to put this guy in there. We're going to let's work this way. Even if you just do an overhaul or well, that is mop up, but it's I see. You don't use it on a small incident. You use it on a bigger incident, and the bigger incidents where they escalate very quickly is where that sort of small incident type of training and mentality and getting everybody on that same page, that's where that pays dividends when the big incident starts to come. I had a slide in one of my classes. It was I don't remember it. But it was all about, if your incident is still escalating and you are not maintaining a span of control, you will fail. It's something along those lines. You will fail. And one of the biggest examples I could think of that is a high-rise fire. You're going to fail. And then the other one is let's lay a high-rise down and throw a row of buildings there. It's you have to have that mentality. And that's the biggest thing. If your people coming in, especially a chief officer, is not thinking with that mentality, then you're talking to them, they're going to think you got like 7 heads. They're not going to know what to do. They're not going to know what's expected of them. So these are all things that, you started at a smaller incident, you build it at the bigger incidents. And then even more importantly, you talk about it after the incident. And then you read Pat Wirkus's article, right? Right. So,
go take his class.
Yes. Yeah. I wish you all the best, Pat. I hope you get the thumbs up, man, because I think you have, you're a rising star. You got a lot to say. That's your legacy too, but having a lot to say. But let me ask you something. This is something else I was thinking about. Now, how many years you on?
So career side, 13 years.
13 years, all in Elizabeth, obviously.
All in
right?
Elizabeth, yes.
So in your 13 years, and this is something I've been thinking about, what have you seen change in Elizabeth in 13 years? And I mean, especially, because I know you guys had some great chief officers all along the way. You're just another in that line. But, what have you seen change there that you think is sort of influenced you to, sort of try and spread that out to other parts of the county and the fire service?
I've seen Elizabeth become proactive. We were always proactive, but I've seen us become more proactive more now than I think ever before. And that's, I'll give in part a lot to the membership with their buy-in, but also the leadership, right? So obviously lithium ion batteries, right, is a new and emerging problem for us. And instead of taking a back seat to it, we've been very proactive in sending chiefs to learn as much as possible about it, to get the equipment to try to mitigate one of these things. I mean, in Newark Airport's parking garage, there's a bunch of EV charging stations. Hopefully, knock on wood, but we're preparing for that, and that's just one of many examples that are out there. We're very progressive with our training. Our training division is extremely busy throughout the year, and they're always looking for the next thing that's coming along and promoting it. So Chief Baracco is the current chief of department. He encourages everybody to go to training. There are very few trainings that he will not send somebody to. Actually, I'm pretty sure he's regretting sending myself and my buddy Captain Bialis to FDIC because we made a 7-page after action review. And I think when he saw it, he was just like, why I send these guys there? But he is very, very proactive in making sure we have the best equipment, possible and the best training possible. And it all starts from the top. So, yeah, I think being proactive, being ahead of the game, training has come to the forefront for our department.
Did you have the same amount of companies when you got on a job, and were you guys doing EMS at that point too?
Yeah, so we still ride the same amount of companies. We did add a battalion chief per shift, though. When I got on, we were running 1 battalion and 1 deputy, and we did add the 2nd battalion chief to the shift to split the city.
And how's that split up?
So Route 1 and 9, US 1 and 9 goes through the city, and that splits it uptown and downtown.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Who are your biggest influences? That have influenced you, and you talked about reading my book and all that. So you've already covered that. I know you're going to say that, but say me, and that's fine. But who are your biggest influences? Who have sort of pushed you along in the job and been there when you were wobbling?
Oh, there's a lot, Chief. There's a lot, but obviously number one's my pop, my dad. So he obviously a ton of experience, right? But he never had a true formal education. And to be honest with you, in high school, I wasn't the best student. He actually would bribe me to get C's in high school, to say, you can't come to the firehouse and hang out unless you get at least C's on your report card, right? So, I mean, that was like the drive. I'm like, well, I got to get C's on my report card so I go hang out at the firehouse. Otherwise, I'm done for a whole marking period, right? And then even after high school, when I started at NJCU, I dabbled with that, but I ended up dropping out. And it wasn't until 2017, he really started pushing me. He's like, if you want to go anywhere in this job, you have to educate yourself, and not only experience, but education is key. So I made the decision at that point to go back and obtain my bachelor's degree through NJCU, and then continue with my master's through Columbia Southern. And I've kind of been on a roller coaster with that. When I graduated with my master's, he said, why don't you go for your executive fire officer through the National Fire Academy? And I'm like, I don't even know if I could get into a program like that. And sure enough, I was lucky enough to be accepted into that program, which I'm going through now. So my education continues. He's always pushed me, right? Because I'm following in his footsteps. Everything he did, I wanted to emulate, but that was one thing that he pushed me towards that he never did himself. And he always kicks himself for that, is not going for a formal education. So I kind of took the reins on that and continued on with the education side of things. And Chief Vignali, Drew Vignali, is the training chief in Elizabeth. He brought me into the rescue when I was a fireman. He knew I wanted to be in the rescue. He brought me in, and he is always, he signs off on, him and Chief Baracco just keep signing off on me to go to these things, and they always are supportive of me and what I do. And there's so many others out there, and some are influencers and they don't even know they are. Andy Starnes, he's like the thermal imaging guru, right? He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know who I am, but I'm taking his thermology classes right now. I never realized, and here I am, a battalion chief. I never realized how much I didn't know about thermal imaging cameras, right? Until I started taking his classes. So he doesn't know who I am, but I know who he is, and he is definitely one of my influences. So there's Chief Castro, like I said, yourself. The list goes on, but I try to follow those who are progressive and proactive in the fire service and learn from them. So hopefully I could pass it on one day, or even if I can do for one guy, then
I'm sure you've done it for more than one guy. So when you were at the university, were we still in the classroom and Malley was still there?
Yes.
Kevin Malley? He had to be an influencer. He was certainly one of mine.
Yes. Right? Yeah. 100%. And the curriculum there, and quite honestly, Chief, the curriculum there sets you up for success for promotion.
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. We use all the books, man. Yeah. We don't use that whole FSRI model thing. And I look, I'm sure I'm going to get hate mail for this, but I'm not a big fan of FSRI. I think it's unrealistic. We use the books at NJCU are the books that are on the promotional lists in New Jersey. So our job, and what Malley always said, Kevin Malley was FDNY, and a friggin' genius, man. And he said that we will produce the best fire officers in the state of New Jersey. And that's what he's done. That's what he did. He took study group and he turned it professional into a university, right? No, not really, but not really. Yeah, here's a question now. Talking about Starnes, and I actually learned a lot of stuff from Mike Daly.
Mike Daly's another one. Yeah.
Do you use a thermal imaging camera at the command post?
100%.
You do.
100%.
So tell us how that has helped.
So I fully am in support of a thermal imaging camera at the command post, and again, we could go down a whole rabbit hole with this. However, especially for doing a 360, trying to figure out where the fire is, where it's going, right? You might not see everything. We can't see through glass, especially the new thermal panes that's out there. But around the window frames, if you got heat behind it, you're going to see you got a good rock and fire or some type of heat signature behind that, right? So, or if I have a basement fire, right? And it's a balloon frame and I'm sending companies to the attic when I got a ripping basement fire, right? A 360 with a thermal imaging camera might be able to point out those cues to you. So you're sending your companies to the right places instead of putting them in potential harm's way. So, again, there are thermal imaging cameras out there that, again, if you're not a big fan of holding the bigger ones, they make the new situational awareness cameras, right? There's one from Seek out there that I happen to like. I think there should be no excuse to not having a tick at the command post. That's my personal opinion, but I think it pays dividends.
Yeah, I never had that, but after taking some of those classes, I was like, boy, that would help. Even something like, is this fire working its way into the cockloft? And then is it working its way into the cockloft in the D exposure, versus the B exposure, But I like the idea of the 360 with the thermal imaging camera. I never think of that because I never was able to do that. in North Hudson. I never did 360 in North Hudson, just couldn't, but I like that idea. That's a great idea of doing a 360 with that.
I have a question for both of you guys. What's the first fire-related book you read? And I don't want to hear, a report from Engine Camp, to make you an officer, like John Norman or any of those books, Bill Clark. Going way back, one of the first books that really had launched your career as an officer, not so much a firefighter, but you know what? Even as a firefighter, both of you, I'd like to ask you what your first book you read.
So we'll go age before beauty here. When my first captain's list was probably around 1985, 86. Well, Chief Flood, who was my captain, was like, okay, we're going to put a study group together. It was me, him, and this guy, Dave Curtis, and Bill Lamoni. And we all became officers. And we took the list and we broke all the books down. And I remember the first books I read, they were relatively simple books. They were the Richmond books. Engine Company Fireground Operation and Truck Company Fireground Operation. They were two little blue books. They were about that thick, but they were tremendous books, very, very, very like tactical and task sort of oriented. And then the other book that really influenced me a lot was McAniff, Strategic Concepts. There's Vinnie Dunn and John Norman and all that, but I think they were the second list because they didn't run the test. And then what happened was there were 8 books on the list. They didn't run the test, and then they put out another book list. So now they took 4 books off and put 4 more books on, and they were Norman and Dunn. And now I wound up reading like 12 books for my exam. But the first ones really influenced were definitely McAniff, the Richmond books, and Freed. Freed was another one. Really, really good books.
How about before that, when you were a firefighter, when you weren't thinking about promotion, you were on 1 or 2 years, maybe 3 years, were there any books that you picked up that might help you be a better firefighter?
You used to read Firehouse and Fire Engineering. They'd be on the kitchen table. I really wasn't much of let me say that again. Fire Engineering and Firehouse. They were on the kitchen table. Wasn't that, I wasn't that really into the books back then, but, and I got a mention report from Engine Company 82. I read it in the 7th grade, and it pushed me into something that, I eventually got to. And thank you, Dennis Smith.
Cool. How about you, Pat?
So the first book for officer was John Norman's book, the Fire Officer's Handbook for Tactics. But going back to firefighter, besides for the Firefighter 1 and 2 books, my first fire engineering, so the first FDIC I went to was either 2008 or 2009. And the first book that I bought there was the Rules of Air Management, or the Air Management for the Fire Service from the Seattle guys. And I guess around that time there was a lot of out-of-air emergencies, and it kind of just was being highlighted like on the secret list and a few other places. So I was like, you know what? I want to see what these guys have to say. So I took their workshop, and then I went and bought their book, and I got a lot out of that book for cool. Firefighter and just managing your air.
Yeah, it's a lot. And look where they are today. Mike's going, with the FARs, a standpipe for air. I think that's going to be the future. It's going to take forever, but I think it's a great idea. And what they set it was hard when they first came out with the book to sell what they were selling. That you leave before the low air alarm, and it's still not happening. And you should be overhauling on air. It's still not happening, but at least it's in our minds. Hey, maybe someday. And they're coming back with the rebreathers, the hour rated rebreathers they're starting to test again, with the little oxygen tanks that remixes and you rebreathe your air. And it's a true hour, not like a 45-minute cylinder. Under working conditions, obviously that's not true. But these new rebreathers that they're testing, and, again, I'll probably never see it. You'll probably never see it. But, we're going to keep moving forward. And with people like you at the helm in these places, I think we're gonna do it.
Like you said, Chief, if you have the right officers that push the right things to do, And again, I'm not saying every time you're going to do things right. I still make mistakes, right? And I learn every single day. And even at the last fire, I'm like, oof, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But even with the mask, right? Just being there to tell your company officer, hey, if I have my mask on, you should have yours on, and your guys should have their masks on, right? And just setting that example. And frankly, seeing what my father has gone through over the years with his lungs, and I mean, let's face it, you guys weren't really wearing masks too much back then, right? And just seeing some of the breathing problems and everything, it encourages me more to wear my mask now, even as a battalion chief, with that step back approach, having my face piece on, and avoiding maybe potential issues down the line.
Yeah, because the smoke is even worse now, man. You know.
Yep, everything's worse, and we need to wake up. You know, you just look at the statistics for cancer in our business. It's awful, and it's not just breathing apparatus. It's washing your turnout gear. It's washing your hood. It's, you know, decon. I never saw it. You know, it'd be a gross decon to get the stuff off your helmet, and I think we need to do it. I'm out 6 years now. We never did that, but I think it's a wise thing to do. Too many of us are getting sick, and some of it's not always the job, but anything we can do to prevent adding more carcinogens to our system will help us in the long run. Chief Avillo, anything in closing, because we're at the end of our time, anything you'd like to close this with?
Well, listen, you know, when I think that we touched on a lot of good stuff here today with a guy that's a rising star, and the fire service needs people like that. You know, we're all duff. You know, we can't get around that. You know, but I'm real happy you're going in the direction you're going, Pat. I know you a pretty long time. I think I know you before you were on a job, hanging around with your dad. But you're doing all the right things, man, and that's good. And I'm proud of you. And I got my fingers crossed for you to be teaching at FDIC. You know, so keep doing what you're doing, bro.
Thank you, Chief. Cool. Thank you.
How about Pat? Anything you'd like to add in closing and summarizing everything you said?
Well, first, thank you both for the opportunity to be on the show. It's really an honor to be here with both of you. And I think my main message is stay proactive, do the right thing, make every day a training day. You know, even if it's just popping on FSRI's website and looking at the new classes they have out there on fire dynamics, whether it's looking at firefighter rescue survey, whatever it is, just make yourself more knowledgeable in the job. Make yourself a better firefighter, fire officer, and chief officer. Take a look at my article, and thank you again.
What month was that in?
May.
So the people, it's in the May. Those of you guys who want to read it, it's in the May issue. I really enjoyed listening to you. You excited me. You made me think. I see the excitement, you know, and there's some places in the fire service, the excitement's kind of getting lost, and some of it you can say it's the younger nonsense. It's people like you who stimulate that, change the culture in the department. I don't know what Elizabeth was like before, but if you have a status quo mediocre culture, it's hard to break that wall down. Those of you who believe we can be better, keep pushing, keep doing it. Be gentle. Don't try to force feed your fellow members, but be gentle and be excited and keep sharing your excitement. And there is a future in the fire service. We're doing well. And thank you for joining us. Until next time, don't forget to put in for FDIC. If you think you have something to say, don't be afraid. Put in. Maybe you're not ready, but put in and get the experience of submitting so that when you are ready next time or the next time or the next time, don't be disappointed, but put in for it and see what the procedure is like, what you have to do to apply. It's a little, I wouldn't say it's cumbersome, but there are steps. And Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And Pat, thanks for being our guest. Chief Avillo, Arthur Avenue in the Bronx for a nice Italian dinner. Or your boat, whichever comes first. Okay, everybody, stay safe.
Leave the gun, take the cannolis. Yeah, everybody enjoy your summer.